Hello, and welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about being an alpha male today, the right way, being the men we're created to be, made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control, protecting, providing. That plays into today's episode. I'll plug in the bio if you want to skip it. It'll be about 3 minutes, 45 seconds after where it starts. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, He got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government, for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents He's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals. And I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news, preacher, a fisher of men. With that, we will roll into the day's topic. All right, man. If you're listening to this, you may know that this is part 3. We did 1. I would really encourage you to listen to part 1, just home security. Part 2, you could take it or leave it. Not everybody's a dog person. Not everybody's in the position in their life to get a dog. It's a big responsibility. That one was on dogs. This one is going to be on guns for home security. Before we get into the ins and outs of the guns, let's talk about philosophy. Let's talk about you being a man, being an alpha male. You ought to see it as part of your role as being an alpha male, as providing and protecting for those in your family, those in your domicile. Can you protect them? Likely you see that as part of your duty. Not your only duty, but part of your duty as a man. In days of yore, that may have meant carrying a sword. Jesus told his disciples to carry swords. The Gospel of Luke. Today, the most effective way to do that is a firearm. We're talking about physically and not spiritually. Somebody attacking your family, your home. The most effective way we have today for one-on-one conflict to project force is a firearm. I would encourage you as a man, if you feel the calling, if you hear the calling to be a protector, to have a firearm. And that's not a fail-safe. It's not, some people think this thing that just by itself is going to do anything. Just owning a gun really doesn't mean anything. It does nothing. Being able to use it effectively is what matters. A lot of people just buy a gun and put it away and think somehow just having it makes them safer. That's not the case. Being able to use it effectively is what matters. Keep that in mind. So if you've decided, yes, I'm a man, I'm an alpha male, I want to be able to protect, and I want to be armed, realize that comes along with having a strategy, having a plan. I didn't talk about this a lot in the first episode because I wouldn't tell you to plan to, back into your bedroom and, throw your nightstand against a door and be armed and have a way to exit maybe out a window or something and having that plan. Because if you don't have any arms, then you're just a sitting duck, as they call it. But if you have a gun, having a plan, like if we hear somebody breaking in, if we think somebody's breaking in, this is where we go. Because it's hard to protect your family if they're all scattered in different places and have no plan to get together and you can't protect them. So again, being armed goes along with having a good plan, having a place where you and your kids know to get together, having a place where you can intercept danger before it gets to those weaker and less able to protect themselves. Having that plan, having those communications, laying that out. Again, it's not this many people think I'm just going to buy a gun and put it under my bed and everything's going to be okay. That's not how that works. So have a plan. Have a home security plan. Know where your exits are. Know where you're going to meet. Bring in some military tactics. Know your choke points. Know where the adversary, the intruder, know where they have to go to get to you and your family, and know how you can intercept them most effectively. And if they don't, if you're protecting the lives of those and your loved ones, then that's what's most important. If they can't get past you, again, that's part of having a plan. I'm not going to get into specifics on that because without knowing you and knowing your capabilities and what weapon you have and your house layout, your property, there's really no way to get into that. But just know that you need a plan of action, a plan for defense. Also, I should say, also know your laws. Laws differ from state to state of what you can and can't do. And I would say that all those are secondary to God's laws, morals, and ethics. You'll find in God's law, if a man is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be guilt for his bloodshed. There's also outlined differences between manslaughter and murder. When it's okay to use force and when it's not. I think all those ought to come first. With that being said, let's get into the guns. Now, you may have a dissenting opinion from me, and that's fine. But I hope that you'll hear me out. You're listening to this for a reason. I know that a lot of you probably don't like the bio every episode, but hopefully, by God's grace, we get new listeners every episode. And you've heard a little bit about my bio. And hopefully, you accept that as some validity. That's why you listen to this. Plenty of podcasts talk about guns and stuff like that, and they do it from a hypothetical situation or viewpoint. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like those podcasts too, but we try and come at this from a real-world first-hand experience. And I'm going to pass that on for what it's worth. At least consider it if it's a different viewpoint than yours. You may decide to go another way. With that being said, firearms for home defense, I would say 12 gauge, buckshot, period, end of sentence. A 12 gauge with buckshot is the most formidable close quarters small arm the average person's going to have, and especially for home defense. Probably not picking a 500 Smith & Wesson or a 50 BMG for home defense. The average thing, the average arm that you're going to have for home defense, 12 gauge buckshot. And you don't have to pick that. There are reasons why not to. But if not, why not? I would submit to you to give me a good, well thought out, based in reality reason why not a shotgun with buckshot. Not only are shotguns the most formidable close quarters weapon for the average alpha male, they are also one of the most affordable. You can get a good quality shotgun with the capability of follow-up shots for $200 to $300 even in today's market. It's rare that something is less expensive and more effective, but I think that's what you get with a good pump action or semi-auto shotgun. So I ask again, why not a shotgun with buckshot? It's not about what's cooler. It's not about what looks better on Instagram. It's not about what the Navy SEALs are running. If it's about protecting your family as an alpha male, it's about what's most effective. And what's most effective, most of the time, is a 12 gauge with buckshot. So put ego aside, put what looks coolest aside, put away how much fun it is to shoot still targets or Mozambique drills or El Presidentes at the range with. Put away the nonsense and think about it realistically. What is the most effective tool for home defense? I know that ARs are the most popular, at least I've been told they're the most popular, at least in recent years, long arm. And I think that every red-blooded alpha male American ought to own an AR-15, and they have their place. There's a reason they are used on the battlefield. There's a reason they're a great battlefield implement. There's a reason I used one in Iraq. There's a reason I used one at times as a private contractor, as a mercenary, in police work, in special assignments. And like I said, I think if you have the ability and the resources, you ought to have one. That doesn't mean it's the best for home defense. If that's what you have, then yes, by all means, press it into that role. But that doesn't mean that it's better. I know there are a lot of arguments out there saying it's the best home defense weapon, but I think that that is from an attitude of people that that's what they have and that's what they like, and they try to justify it as being the best home defense weapon. There is a thing about less penetration because the bullets go very fast and tend to break apart. I get that, and that's not an invalid argument, but I would say solve problem number one first. Problem number one first is hitting your target and stopping the threat. And a shotgun does that better. A 12 gauge with buckshot does that better, at least at home defense ranges. Again, I'm not going to put you down for having an AR-15. I think, like I said, every alpha male that has the ability should train with and be well versed in an AR-15. We just did an episode about, the modern Minuteman. But that's not what we're talking about. You kid yourself into thinking because you like AR-15s or because Navy SEALs use AR-15s or because SWAT teams use AR-15s that those are the best for the job. I would routinely, as a cop, have access to. In fact, I was one of the ones in charge of the armory. I had access to full autos. I had access to submachine guns and full auto M4s. Most commonly, if I was, as they say, kicking down a door, making entry into a room in a hostile situation, the number one thing that I took wasn't those things. It was a 12 gauge with buckshot. Because I didn't care what looked cool. I cared about what was going to keep me alive and eliminate the threat the best. And in that environment, in that situation, all ego aside, all the red dots and cool optics and laser sights and everything aside, the best thing for that, if I want to come out the other side of that house alive, is a 12 gauge with buckshot. Let's talk about the handgun. Now, a lot of people will say the handgun is best for home defense. Again, I would disagree. There are some valid arguments. The great thing about a handgun is that you can have it on you all the time. The great thing about a handgun is that you can use it one-handed. Now, I know you can use a shotgun one-handed and train to do that, but practically speaking, a handgun is easier to use one-handed, which could be important if you're, say, on the phone with 911 with the other hand, or let's say carrying a young child under your other arm. That is valid. Here's the other thing. The one gun debate is not hypothetical for a lot of people. A lot of young men listening to this, a lot of alpha males that just recently decided to, and I just dealt with one this week. He decided, you know what, I want to step up. I want to be an alpha male. He didn't say that, but he said, I want to step up in so many words, not these exact words, but I want to step up and be armed and be able to protect those around me, talking about his family. For those kind of people, the one gun debate is not hypothetical. If he's going to have one gun to carry on him, to have in the car, to have in the house, to when he's out and about on the street, yeah, a handgun, because you can have a handgun on you. And that's the point of a handgun. It's not because they're the most effective. In fact, looking at any ballistics, any statistics you want, handguns are not effective one-shot stop or even 2 or 3 shot stop. They're not effective for that. Handguns exist because you can have them on you all the time. Realize that. They're a great tool for a lot of things. I carry a handgun on me more than anything else. I train with a handgun more than anything else. I consider it my duty as a man, as an alpha male, as a protector, to not just protect my family, but other people's families with the talents that God's given me. As it is written, as Jesus says, to he who has, more shall be given, and he will have in abundance. Talking about using the talents we've been given. I've been given the talent to be a master handgun shooter, and I don't take credit for that. All the talent I have was a gift from God, but I consider it my responsibility as an alpha male and as a master handgun shooter to protect those around me. That doesn't stop at my front door, and for that reason I have a handgun, and because a handgun is the hardest to be effective with, the hardest to shoot, and the least effective ballistically, I train with it the most. That doesn't mean that it's the best tool for home defense. Again, if that's what you have, then use it and learn how to be effective with it and do drills and practical things that will help you press that into a good home defense gun. Let's just say you are wherever you are in your house right now. If you're at home, picture where you most likely are, on the couch, whatever, and 2 guys break in, one's got a baseball bat and one's got a crowbar. You can have in your hands a Glock 19 or whatever modern handgun you want, or a fully loaded 12 gauge with buckshot. Which one do you pick? Again, it's not about what's the most fun to shoot. It's not about the coolest optical sights or all the other things. It's about what's going to protect life the best for you. You might be able to make a case for you why it's not a shotgun with buckshot, but I still submit that that is the best tool for the job. Okay, with that being said, I will get into what I think is optimal, some best choices and some secondary choices, whether you're going to run a shotgun, an AR, or a handgun for home defense. Now, I know that a lot of people like pump shotguns. Again, I'm going to dissent from that. I have a lot of training and experience. I think that although mechanically pump shotguns can be very reliable, I've seen a lot of people under stress, and I've heard it from legit sources and pretty influential police shootings, that people tend to malfunction shotguns, that pump action shotguns in the real world. I've seen people get nervous, and if you don't completely work the action on that shotgun all the way back and all the way forward, that gun doesn't run. So although the action of the pump may be super reliable, human error plays into that. Whether it's just stress, the stress of being shot at, the stress of having a bunch of adrenaline, or the stress of actually being shot and having blood loss and things like that. With the semi-auto, you get rid of that. It's just the reliability of the gun itself. The gun will function unless it has some kind of mechanical problem. You take the human element out of that. Also, a big advantage of the semi-auto is that if you're strong enough to hold it one-handed, you can pull the trigger and it will cycle one-handed. The pump will not. You can run a pump shotgun and train to do it one-handed, but that takes quite a bit of training, and that's rolling a pretty big rock uphill. So my pick, if you can afford it, is a good semi-automatic 12-gauge. And I'm going to dissent again from popular opinion. I like double-aught buck. I run double-aught buck. But I like number 4 buck better. If you just listened to the last episode of Gunfighter Life, I'll reiterate it. If you listen to both podcasts, forgive the redundancy, but I don't know that everybody does. Number 4 buck is amazing. I've hunted quite a bit with buckshot, and I think the most deadly buckshot is number 4 buck. For your average, let's say 2 3/4 standard 12-gauge load, you get 8, maybe 9 pellets of double-aught buck. For number 4 buck, you get 27 pellets. If you step up to a 3-inch Magnum, you get 12 standard in a 3-inch double-aught buck. If you go to number 4, you get 41 pellets. 41 pellets. Now, just for argument's sake, say they're going about the same velocity. Number 4 buck, I believe, is 22, 24, 20-something caliber. 00 buck is 30-something caliber. But I'd rather have the 41 pellets. In my experience, hunting deer and bear, those 41 pellets or those 20 whatever pellets give you a much higher likelihood of hitting a vital organ, a vital artery, something like that. If you hit something like that, in my experience, it doesn't make a ton of difference whether it's 22 caliber or 24 caliber or 30 caliber or 33 caliber. Hitting a vital thing, whether it's an artery or an organ or the central nervous system, is far more important than the size of that projectile. Double-aught buck has its place, and double-aught buck is a great choice, but for me, I prefer number 4 buck, and a great in the middle is number 1 buck. A little bit more pellets, not nearly as many as number 4 buck, but still more than 00 buck. So that's my optimal. If you say 20 gauge, I say great. 20 gauge is phenomenal. I just have so much training experience on the 12 gauge and the platforms, and I have so much ammo for it. But if you say, hey, I hunt a lot, I have smaller members of my family, or I just prefer to run a 20 gauge, and I've run both, and I run a 20 gauge more effectively, I'd say great. If you get a good solid hit on somebody with a full load of buckshot with a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge, yeah, the 12 gauge is a little bit more powerful, but the degree of that is so much higher, still more powerful in a 20 gauge than it is in, say, a 223 round or a 9mm or a 45 ACP. The amount of energy is just so much higher. I would say a good runner-up is the 20 gauge. What if you say that's great, but I'm already invested in AR-15 and I'm not going to get a shotgun right now. I have the AR-15 for home defense. I disagree with your argument that the 12 gauge is better than the AR. I want to be able to dump 30 rounds down my hallway. Or that's a little unfair. I want to be able to take a precise shot with my red dot sight inside the house. I like knowing that I can get a good T-zone hit at those distances. I want to run the AR. I'd say, okay, great. You're going to do that. I would say your best setup is a red dot sight with backup irons, because just from my experience, if you need something and you need it right now, if it has batteries, that might be the time those batteries don't work. So I would say a good red dot sight, fast acquisition, red dot on a setting for whatever ambient light you expect to have in the situation with good backup irons. Your best home defense, I would say have a white light mounted on it. And that goes for the shotgun too. A good white light set up on your shotgun. A good flashlight on your shotgun if we're talking about home defense. A flashlight's pretty important. So your AR with your flashlight and your red dot sight and your backup irons. And I would say paramount for this ammo selection, not green tips. There's a reason the military uses green tip armor-piercing ammo. That's not what you want for home defense. There's a reason the military uses full metal jackets. Again, I would say not for home defense. I would say give a good hard look at 55 grain, soft point, or hollow point ammo. Again, problem number 1, hit the target. Stop the target from doing what it's doing that's causing you to shoot it. And I think the best choice for that is a good soft point or hollow point round.
zeroed for that gun for that distance. And realize one of the shortfalls of the AR-15 is the height over bore, meaning the height of the optic above the bore. If you don't train routinely and really have it as second nature, when you go to make a headshot at close distance, if you aim for the center of the head, you're likely going to miss because those sights are so much higher than the bore. You have to know that you aim above the head if you want to hit the head at a close distance, or aim at the very top of the head if you want to hit the middle of the head at a very close distance. You have to train so that's second nature, because under stress, you likely won't do that unless you've trained so much. So I would say know that, and you really have to train that. Because even with a lot of reps under stress, people tend to put that red dot where they want the bullet to go, and at close distances on the AR, that doesn't work. So know that and train that to overcome that. Next choice, let's talk about handguns. If you're going to run a handgun, I'd say a white light target ID. Having a white light that attaches to the gun, it's not like carrying a handgun. You know, the size and weight of the handgun for home defense is not really an issue. So I'd say a good white light target ID, a good white light, and a good secure way to access that handgun quickly. And good modern defensive loads. And I don't care which one you pick, the Spear Gold Dots or the Remington Golden Sabres or the Hornady Critical Duty. I don't care if you go with 115s or 124s or 147s. I like 147s. I like Winchester Ranger Ts. That's me. If you want to go with 115 grain Spear Gold Dot, that's fine. But for home defense, don't go with FMJs. Go with a good modern, street-proven, expanding hollow point round. And forget about Hollywood. Forget about those things. Notice that if you study any real-world numbers, 80% of handgun wounds are not fatal. So the odds of you shooting somebody once with a handgun and having them stop right away, I wouldn't count on that. If that happens, that's great. Or if you pull out your gun and they just stop because they don't want to get shot, that's great. But don't count on the best case scenario. You're planning for a bad scenario. So plan on multiple shots. Be good with multiple shots. That's one of the things of the handgun we talked about, that they're not terminally effective compared to an AR or a shotgun. So practice multiple follow-up shots quickly. Practice your Mozambique drills, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. Or any number of failure drills, 2 to the chest, 2 to the pelvic girdle. 4 to the chest quickly because he's got a knife and he's running at you. Anyway, those are my setups. Like I said, for me, 12 gauge buckshot, number 4. I like the Benelli M2, but if you wanted a Mossberg or a Beretta 1301 or something like that, that's great. If you can't afford, there's a big thing about the semi-autos. If you want a reliable one, they tend to cost a little bit more. But a good pump shotgun will be my second, an 870 Mossberg 500 Maverick 88 if you're on a budget. I would still take a Maverick 88 with a good solid buckshot load over my most expensive, $4,000 handgun. Because again, it's not what's cool, it's about what gets the job done better. And a Maverick 88 with 00 buck or number 4 buck or number 1 buck is still far more effective than the coolest, fanciest, titanium compensated red dot sighted handgun. And I love those kind of handguns. They're just not the best tool for the job. With that, guys, please stay tuned to the end. I have some what I think are pretty good tactical tips for this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. If you thought anything in here was worth $1, the fraction of the cost of the cheapest box of ammo I can think of, please consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com and the Patreon link. These episodes are free to listen to, but they're not free to put out. So if you want to help contribute, be part of the tribe, step up and help support, feel free. Again, go to goodshepherdtraining.com, go to the Patreon link. I recently have been getting quite a few questions on practical shooting drills and shooting techniques and things like that. So for the patrons, I uploaded a few videos of good practical drills that would apply to today's show and a bunch of other shows. If you think that content would be worth $1, if you didn't want to support the podcast for the sake of supporting the podcast, you might want to support just to get that content. Also, we have merch if you want to fly the banner of the Alpha Male podcast. Some pretty cool metal Alpha Male mugs and some shirts, some shooting shirts, some just Alpha Male shirts. Again, your one-stop shop for that, goodshepherdtraining.com. And if you don't want to support financially, share the podcast with somebody you think that would like it. And if you want to share more globally, like, subscribe, leave a few stars, or leave a review of the podcast to help others find it. All right, enough about that. Let's get into some tactical tips. One thing from my years in police work, don't assume that the person you're dealing with is a rational person like you. Forget about those myths like on the movies, or, if you rack the pump action shotgun, if you rack the shotgun, it's going to make somebody super afraid. That sound is super scary. Or racking the slide on a handgun, that's super intimidating like in the movies. You may be dealing with somebody that's on so many drugs, they don't know what planet they're on, let alone that you have a shotgun in your hands. Those people can be super violent, whether it's drugs or just mental disability. I feel for people with mental disabilities, I really do, but that doesn't mean they can't be dangerous. Let me tell you a story, and I rarely tell stories about my police time, but this one is applicable for today. And this was a woman with a pretty severe mental disability. This is an apartment complex, and this lady broke into her neighbor's apartment. A young single mother who had a young infant baby. And she was taking this baby and hanging it over the balcony, acting like she was going to drop it, playing with it, shaking it over the balcony. Now, I feel for that lady having a mental disability. That doesn't make that situation any more deadly for that little infant baby. And I'm there to protect that little infant baby. A human being, a precious life that can't protect itself. The most helpless among us. That was the call that I got, and I was the one that showed up to that call. And I had to deal with that situation. The takeaway from that for you is don't assume that the person you're dealing with is going to be like you. I've dealt with people in other situations on so many drugs, it wouldn't have mattered what I had in my hand. If I had a nuclear weapon pointed at their face, they wouldn't have registered with them. And they can be very violent. So don't count on the racking of the shotgun or the racking of the handgun. Have your sword, your implement for projecting force, in the condition you need it to be most effective. Got nothing else out of this tactical tip today, or out of this episode today. Hopefully that tactical tip rang true. And I have another tactical tip that plays in for today. And I heard this from a training company, and I'm going to put it in my own words. But your goal for defensive shooting, whether it's home defense or concealed carry, is not to kill the person. To put it the best way I know how, and the best way I've heard it explained, you are using force to get that person to stop their behavior. Whatever behavior that was, they got you to use that force. Your goal is to stop them from doing that behavior. Whether they die or not is a side effect that's inconsequential to you. The second they stop doing that behavior that required you to use force, your job is done. So if you ever have to, and I hope you don't, ever have to go to court, they say, why did you do this? Why did you use this level of force? Whatever that was. They were doing a behavior that I had to intervene to save and protect life. And I did what I had to do until that behavior stopped. Period. And I'm going to try something new, putting a verse in at the end of these. Just try it out. As you heard in the bio, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Deuteronomy chapter 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle, that the priest shall approach and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid. Do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. All right, alpha males, get out there, be strong, prove yourself a man, and have a blessed day.